even though it's been an unbelievable 2.5 years with him. As soon as he committed to us, he flipped his truck. I tell everybody, I'm saying he was so damn excited, to become to Georgia Tech that he ended up rolling his truck over. But he was banged up, had surgery. He didn't really have any fundamental training as an offensive lineman with me. And I've been an O-line coach for 25 years, 20 years prior to being a head coach. He had no fundamental O-line training really that entire first year. He's rolling around on a scooter, jumping in the middle of drills, and I'm trying to get him out of the way, afraid somebody's going to, roll up on him or ball's going to come near him. He's in the middle of it, wanting every bit of it. And at the same time, he's got a steel pin that, 2.5 inches sticking out his big toe. So you knew he had some. You didn't know at that point was it toughness or was it absolute insanity. So he ends up playing that year, and just the way he played, the way he practiced that year after really having no conditioning, no fundamental offensive line work, just showed he had a lot of grit to him, a lot of toughness. Didn't miss a snap that year. Had an unbelievable game just to open the season. So when that season ended, the 24 season ended, was super excited really to get a fresh, clean slate with Red, and be able to really put our hands on him and really start to develop him into the player we all thought he could be.
Yeah, and he's, I think, a very underrated athlete. I know everyone talks about the toughness. And when first you start calling a guy tough and these superlatives like gritty, tough, hard-nosed, which he all is, but, he was fast, 5.05. He was hitting 4.9s, they told me, during training. He was actually disappointed to only get 5.05, which is moving. And you've seen him. It's more about functional. Like, he's down the field. He's out in space. He's an athlete out there. But I think I was watching some of his basketball dunks and things he was doing. I know he did some track and field, I think, with the discus or shot. But, I feel like maybe, as much as we talk about the tenacity and the toughness, which is you want that, but a good athlete too.
Yeah, he is. He all around, when you look top to bottom as an offensive lineman, and I've been very blessed to coach a lot of really good ones. And he's top to bottom the best I've ever coached. And you really see his athleticism when he gets to the second level. And we do a lot of we run a lot of counter, a lot of outside zone, and whether it was him pulling, adjusting on pulls, getting to the second level, climbing the linebackers, latching onto him and finishing. He really showed his athleticism. And that's the thing that not a lot of guys possess. Maybe that second level, those backers who are more athletic. But that also came with understanding the scheme of what we were doing. He understood what the running back was doing. He understood what the other linemen were doing, the quarterback, the tight ends. He understood the full gamut of the scheme, so it allowed him to put himself in anticipate position, anticipate where the guys are going to be, to put himself in position to really execute at a high level. So now you take the toughness, the athleticism, the anticipation, and football intelligence, put it all together. And I think y'all got a hell of a player coming to Houston.
Did you have a feeling about the Texans? Was joking with Nick Cassera a little bit about James Lipford, who's their assistant general manager, is a Georgia Tech alum, a linebacker and special teams guy for the for you guys. And obviously he spent some time there. And when we were talking with Keylan last night, he said, "Hey, I had a pretty good feeling because they were on me consistent. They were looking at me back in the season. They didn't need the Senior Bowl. They didn't necessarily need a combine meeting. I thought the private workout with Cole Popovich kind of maybe cemented it, if anything needed to be. But did you have a feeling about the Texans that, hey, maybe if he is going to the first round, that might be the spot that he goes to?"
You don't really have a clue. All the scouts are coming through. But then when James showed up for the Wake Forest game on the road, right, that's not an easy place to get to, right? And I think it was game 5, 6 something in the season. And I'm like, okay, this is real. There's some real interest there. Of course, at that time, you don't know how much interest. Obviously, knowing James, knowing Nick from his days back in New England when I was at UCF, a lot of respect for him and just a ton of respect for D'Amico and the program he runs. Probably one of my favorite coaches in the NFL. We have similar backgrounds, similar places, where we're from. There's a lot of similarities there, the Nick Saban, crossover part. But I've really followed him and been really rooting for him as a head coach. And man, when you watch their team play last year, right? And I think it's a mix of the toughness, the physicality, the quality, disciplined football he plays. But there's an old school mindset there, right? But he has good players, and good kids are a high value to him and to the entire organization, right? And you can see that with what you guys did with Will, and some of the other guys on the team. And so, just all in all, I didn't say it much. I didn't say it to many people, but I had my fingers and my toes crossed that he would end up back at Houston.
That's awesome. What was the moment like? You're there with his family and his agents, and just when the call came in, and we could kind of, from some of the stuff that they've posted, you could kind of feel the emotions. It must have been charged up for everybody, no more than him. I was watching him and his excitement when he stood up after they announced the pick. I guess he'd already probably gotten the call, but that was looked like a really cool moment.
Yeah, so I hung out at a little restaurant right by where his house was, and I didn't want to be there too long, and putting more pressure on him and feeling the pressure of it. And I got there, it was probably about pick 20, 21, and he has a football in his hand. He's just spinning the football back and over and over. I'm like, man, we've talked about this, Red. Like, just relax, man. Whatever happens, is going to happen. It's out of your control. He's like, I know, but I want this. I want this bad. Houston's coming up. Houston's coming up. And he's like, I'm good with anywhere, but Houston's coming up. And he's flipping the ball, and myself and his agent, we talked outside for a moment. He's opening the door, and then we came in, and he got the call, and just the excitement, the initial excitement, right? But then the sheer just emotional tidal wave that overcame him and his wife, and his mom, and his other family members. And the coolest part about it was last night was red if anything was ever red. And I mean, it was a small group, probably 10 people. He had his workout shorts and t-shirt on, and I think Crocs. There was no fan. He didn't want media there. Didn't want any of that. That's not him. Not him at all. And I think the nicest thing I will say, we had to have a nice toast with a nice bottle of Pappy last night. So
There you go.
yeah, I said fitting for going out to Houston, but my wife bought me a nice cowboy hat yesterday.
Nice.
And I said, you know what? It's got to be Houston. My wife buys me a cowboy hat. I'm going to my daughter's tall and small ball tonight, which is cowboy themed, right? So I got a hat. I said, he goes to Houston, man. Life is good right now.
Heck yeah, good vibes, yes. And I think it's mostly about whatever you do when they put you out there, but sometimes it's where they play. They've got some linemen here, and he'll compete with all of them. Like he said last night, he credited you for wanting him to master all three interior spots, because that's what you got to do in the NFL. So you were laying a foundation and groundwork, thinking about his future, and then he snapped some at the Senior Bowl, and we'll see where they wind up lining him up. And it was just obviously he wants to get it on the grass before you make these. You don't just hand out starting jobs, But do you feel like center guard? What did you like about the flexibility, or if he did wind up playing, the center position?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me why we didn't play the center, and if I had played in the center this year, right, then you're breaking in new guys, and he played. He did it in practice. For 2 years, I kept telling him, hey, this is going to be something you need in your toolbox, and he one-on-one pass rush every day. He'd jump in and get a few reps at center, and if he had a bad snap, I mean, he was critical of himself. He'd be after practice snapping, and just to get it right. And he was always kind of that emergency backup guy for us. But I believe in position versatility on the O-line. That's how you develop O-linemen to have an opportunity to play at the next level, because there's a lot fewer of them there. It hedges your bets and getting to that next level and being able to stick. At that point, we don't know if he's going to, drafted first round, fifth round, free agent. That didn't really matter. I just wanted to be the best version of himself, the best offensive lineman. And I think he, depending on how it works out at center there, I think whether it's this year, whether it's next year when he makes the move to center, Red's going to be an all-pro center in the league. I do believe that. I strongly believe that.
Coach, last one for you. we've seen a lot of examples of toughness. I was watching some plays where it's 20 yards down the field, and he's finishing. He's putting the guy on his back. I think I don't know when the bloody nose thing happened, and that obviously didn't bug him at all. But we would just see some things like that. What were some ones that jump out to you where you're like, I know the foot thing is, of course, crazy amount of toughness and like grit and overcoming a scary situation. He was worried at one point they'd take his foot off because of the bone infection. But just on the field, what were some things you saw just kind of day to day, or maybe something jumped out?
There's so many of them. One of them was last summer, midpoint of the summer workouts. We had our midsummer conditioning test right before the 4th of July. And we ran 20 gassers, right? And that's a hell of a conditioning test now, especially for a big man. He's out in front of the conditioning test, turning around behind him as he's running, just yelling at everybody else, right? And he's way out in front. I mean, he's up there with the tight ends, defensive ends, way in front of all the linemen, and turning around and yelling at all the linemen while he's running, 16, 17, 18, right? Then he goes out and he's pushing guys from behind, getting them across the line. That was one of them last summer that really established his leadership on the football team. Everybody's seen the pictures of the Clemson game with the blood all over him. But one of the cooler things that he did the last couple of weeks as we've been in spring practice, right? He's been going on visits everywhere, back and forth, in and out of town, workouts, meetings, right? He still had his login to watch practice and scrimmages. And he watched every practice and every scrimmage, right? He would come out to practice the next day and he'd come straight to me and he said, Coach, why is so-and-so too wide on his landmark on his pulls? What are we doing on this? What are we doing here? Coach Godsey, Coach Godsey put these new schemes in, and I really like what we're doing with this. How about the left guard on this? What's he doing? The center, all right? Where's his eyes looking? He's critiquing every single player on the offensive line right now as he's going through all these meetings and what is really the biggest job interview of his life. It just shows the selflessness that he has, the leadership that he has. But you can't go through all these meetings, all these workouts, and still watch your college, teammates and critique them and then give input if you don't have a super high level of mental toughness.
It's generous and unusual. Not everybody's like that, but sounds like the Texans got a heck of a guy. So it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to covering him and getting to know him. And I think the fans here are very excited, and rightfully so.
No, he's special. He's a special young man. We bonded in so many ways. You guys got a great one. And now I don't have any questions about how he's going to represent the organization and the city of Houston while he's out there.